All right, hello everyone. This is the static site editor product design and UX sync call for November 16th. And as we discussed on the earlier engineering call, our group is being merged with the editor group, which means there's no more static site editor group to have a weekly call. So this will be our final weekly sync. But as we were discussing before I hit record, we'll be setting up a nearly identical UX product and design sync call for the editor group, which will just have more categories to talk about. So keep an eye on that. It'll be on a different playlist, but otherwise the format will be about the same. So finding my agenda in all of these tabs. I brought this up on the earlier call, Michael. I saw you dropped it in the product section. I was talking to Marcel about the same thing, the hackathon that's coming up. I think it's a great opportunity for finding some either quick wins or medium-sized isolated chunks of work that people might want to pick up for the hackathon that wouldn't necessarily disrupt any of the ongoing research or ideas that you have. The only one I had come across so far had been the one related to your keyboard shortcuts menu, which I thought would be a great improvement, but one that we're not likely to pick up in the next 6 to 9 months, given the bigger areas of focus that we have on our plate. I haven't gone back through our list of 180 issues or whatever that are labeled settings and navigation with this lens, but I intend to this week, and we should probably standardize on a label or some way to indicate them if it's not already there.
Okay. So what's good about that then is that might give me kind of a green light to start breaking down those issues into like smaller issues, because right now it's just a proposal, or like here's the thing, but it feels like it seems like it was well received and it's straightforward enough that we can probably break it down and then break it off to small chunks so that anyone can come in to tackle it.
Yeah, I think that's a good plan, and I guess that's another thing I need to consider before I label these ready for hackathon is how much work we'd have to put in refinement and breaking up any issues that I identify. We don't want to overload ourselves with admin work while we're trying to get all this other work done. But it's all necessary. So we'll get the right number of issues identified and refined. I think there was an epic going around that Marcel linked me to where they were collecting hackathon issues, but I don't want to reassign because it can only be part of one epic. This came up earlier, whether or not we should probably rely on labels instead of epics to collect this work, and then maybe have a board that we can reference. But otherwise, I don't have a lot on the agenda. My updates are I will be continuing to refine issues and organize our settings and nav issues under that category epic that I created and referenced last week. I think that's probably my top priority this week, outside of the other admin type product things I need to do, getting ready for kickoff. So we're recording the kickoff video tonight. We did some planning for the editor group, 13.7 planning. We have identified some good themes for work that's mostly carryover from stuff we were already working on. So there's nothing really interesting we need to talk about, except maybe the one we can carry over. I clearly didn't get to my computer in time to make these notes in the agenda, so I'm going off the top of my head. The one that we could go over is I'd like to carve out some time in 13.7 for technical review of the ability to search in settings. And I know you're currently doing some solution validation and design work, and I'd like to, in parallel, get them some dedicated time to review what you're working on, work with you, so that ideally, maybe we hit the ground running next milestone, 13.8 and get something going with that. So that's pretty much it on my side.
Thanks for that. On my list, I guess there's like the user menu thing, that issue that I found. It's listed under like the navigation work, but it feels like there's some quick wins there. Like whether we do them or not, I feel like there's an opportunity here, kind of like the keyboard shortcuts, where we could list out what needs to be done and whether we take it up, if we have bandwidth, or we offload it to someone else. But this is definitely one where we can't just send it to another group, because the user menu is kind of in that limbo of like no team really owns it, which means it falls on us if we want to action on it. So whether we submit it for hackathon or we do it ourselves, that's, at least if it's all spec'd out, at least we know what we would expect. Last week, I didn't get as far with the solution validation work that I needed to get done. So I'll try to get back on that this week, try to get that going. So last week did not make progress on that.
Problem. I agree that user menu is probably a nice little isolated corner of our domain that we can start iterating on pretty quick. So yeah, feel free to start thinking about how you would realign those. I know this issue you linked in the profile has some suggestions. You can, build on those and see what you think is right. I think this could play into how we think about settings as well, because there's obviously settings under this user menu. So we've got to keep those in mind as well.
Yeah, is this similar to this? I vaguely remember an issue. I think it was around the dark theme or something like that. Or is this like a separate conversation?
The dark, the toggling of dark mode was something that kind of connected me to this user menu issue. So they're related very closely, as in engineer proposed a change to add a toggle to toggle dark mode on and off, but then it opened up this can of worms from my side to say, hey, a lot of this stuff in the user menu is kind of messed up. But then I then discovered the issue that kind of also highlighted it. So it was like, there's probably enough thinking done on this and like I came from it like not even seeing the other issue, and we kind of aligned on the same solution. So it's like, okay, I think we have a place to go there. So yeah.
Yeah, I think I saw your issue and it made sense to me, because I think it's like issues with the naming of some of those items in that list. And that makes sense to me. So that is exciting. I think it's my turn. So my update is that I'm working on testing scripts for the benchmarking studies. So there are going to be, I think, 4. So one is around the top nav bar, which is what I'm using as kind of like a shorthand, but it's basically going to be like a study around wayfinding and moving between levels and kind of interacting with items in the top nav bar. And then there's one that's going to be around project and group settings. This one was a little bit tricky because I was like, I don't know if I should just do projects or group. I'm not sure yet, but that is also going to be another usability testing study, which is basically giving them different tasks that would lead them to finding certain settings and seeing how they kind of navigate their expectations around where a setting would be, and have some like upfront questions as well to explore that topic. So if you have any research questions related to these areas that you think would make sense to include in the study, feel free to put them in the agenda or comment in the issue if anything comes to mind, even things you're just curious about. And then if there's any usage data available, let me know. I don't necessarily think there will be. I think the top navbar more button was like just implemented or something. But if you know of any, that would help with identifying tasks to include in testing as well. So yeah, that is my
We,
update.
we did just get the more button instrumented. The other ones I think were a release or two before that, when the growth team was working on it. So we should have at least the main sections of the nav instrumented. We can get some data. I was just looking through your docs that you linked, and I was curious. There's 3 different metrics you're intending to collect. Which one do you think is, just in your opinion, if I could put you on the spot, is like the most telling or most like important of the 3? So you've got findability rate, time on task or number of clicks, and first click testing. Which one do you think
Okay.
is maybe the most likely for us to improve?
So I will say findability rate is probably the one that will be most relevant when we're comparing between the existing and the proposal. So if it takes, well, one, if they're able to find it more in the proposal, that's great. But also, it could also be that it takes less time to find it, which would also be pretty cool. First click testing, I think, would help more around the mental model. So understanding where people are thinking to go first, even if they change their answer and they find it later on, like what was that first initial gut feeling? But I do think findability rate might be the most important one.
Cool. Definitely keep that in mind. And I believe it's one of our OKRs to define like our overarching success metrics for these initiatives. And they don't all have to be the same for every initiative, but
if you
that
see,
would be, yeah.
If you see the page that's linked above those metrics, that was defined, I guess, on the research team side. So things about evaluating navigation changes as a whole, like the overall sort of thing, and then for individual projects. So I just worked based on that for now, but definitely it can vary. We can iterate on it.
Perfect. Very excited.
So I'm basically in the planning mode. I'm hoping to start the testing in the first week, I guess end of November / first week of December, or maybe earlier, if I get the task done and the recruiting done. But that's
That'd be great.
Cool.
I mean, specifically the project and group settings, I'd be really curious about those results and how quickly we can follow up with solution validation on any of the work that Michael's putting together for bringing a search menu into there, and whether it can help findability or help drive any of those metrics immediately. Because I think we'd want to have a similar survey in the solution validation or similar script to follow that would measure improvements in those areas. And then the time frame sounds great if we could be confident that we're at least going to move the number in the positive direction and then start implementing that in 13.8. That'd be wonderful.
Yeah, it definitely would be ideal to do similar ones, but it might vary. The proposal might come up with other things as well. So if there's at least some core tasks that we can compare between the two, I think that'd be great.
Yeah. Well, that's it for the agenda. Thanks, everyone. Anything else before we stop the recording?
Well, actually, this says it's not dependent on the recording, but I do have a question around the work. I looked earlier in the agenda, and I think Vasily mentioned an MR draft related to the analytics tab. And I was just wondering if you got kind of a sense of the amount of work or the weight of it. This is just personal curiosity, because I know, for example, we have like 13 of those issues, and I'm like, are those quick wins or are those big issues? Just curious.
It's a good question. I think that it's probably a mixed bag, and obviously I can't apply a engineering weight off the top of my head, but from what Vasily said, there were some things he had to figure out and some considerations that had to be made. But the MR that he has prepared, it's not ready to merge quite yet, but it's nearly there. And then once it's ready, it can be used as a template for a lot of the others. And so it should speed up a lot of the others. Something just fell over there. I don't know what it's a ghost. I lost my train of thought. Oh, so then when we get to the point where we're working on the other features, there's just likely going to be a few that have some edge cases and complications. Like if you turn off, I think this is the example that highlights it best, but if you turn off the issue feature on a project level, there's still issues on the group level. So you want to be able to get to that menu item. But if you turn it off on the group level, we want to make sure it also turns them off on the side nav on the project level, I believe.
Got it.
So there's some that kind of cross over, especially when there's
Yeah.
group and project settings. There's some that influence others. I believe there's also, like, if you turn off issues, there's something in the operations menu that measures. I forget exactly what feature, but
maybe
incidents, maybe?
or alerts,
Maybe it's
or
incidents.
something like that.
Yeah, and then yeah, incidents I think might have been it, and maybe in the metrics tab too. Like, we need to make sure. I don't know. There's several of these like interconnected dependencies that we would need to keep in mind. I believe our best bet would probably be to ship all the ones that are obvious and then work with the other groups that own these features to make sure we're catching all those edge cases and try and get on the radar as quickly as possible. Just to, I mean, we could just have input. They don't need to implement. We're not trying to push work on anybody else, but yeah. So short answer, for many of them, it looks like it should be relatively small amount of work. We're hoping in 13.7 to get analytics and potentially operations features. Those two have pretty well-defined issues, and you can turn them on and off already. We just need to work on the hiding the menu.
Got it. Thank you.
Cool. Well, that's it for the static site editor calls. We'll see you when we're chatting about the editor group, which is going to be exactly the same. All right. Everyone, have a good night or morning.
You too. Bye.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.